FNAF has posted a new video that has proven to be a little controversial. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, so I'm going to watch it now and share my thoughts. Okay, so this theory is based off of one of the latest Tales of the Pizzaplex books. I have not read them yet. I have heard a bit about it from Rye Toast, and I'm kind of relying on John here to tell me what I need to know.
Recently, the entire FNAF community has lost their minds over something called the Mimic. This new character has apparently solved a bunch of mysteries surrounding Security Breach.
And every time I hear the Mimic, I cannot help but picture like a Mimic from D&D.
The Mimic is actually something we've heard before in this franchise. The first instance of the word Mimic being used in a FNAF game was actually in FNAF World with the Mimic Ball. If you used this ability while fighting enemies, it would mimic any attack you made, therefore sending that same attack a second time. But as far as the Mimic we know today, there's actually two versions of it. The program version of it was actually introduced last month in the last Tales book in a story called The Storyteller, but
yes, I've heard about that one.
The physical Mimic was actually introduced in the most recent Tales book in a story called The Mimic. This book actually doesn't release until May 2nd, but some bookstores are just putting them on the shelves early, and that's how I got it. The Mimic centers around Edwin and his son David, who was known for carrying around a white tiger plushie. After Edwin's wife Fiona passed away while giving birth to David, he was now a single father with little money. Edwin worked for Fazbear Entertainment as an engineer, building and fixing robots such as Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy for the company. The story states that one of the first animatronics he created was a robotic vacuum cleaner. He then sold enough of the vacuums to start his own company, but his company ended up failing and being bought out by Fazbear Entertainment for unknown reasons. The Fazbear executive stated that Edwin was, quote, doing the right thing. Now, as a single dad who's low on money, he lived in an abandoned factory. He turned a portion of the factory into a makeshift apartment for him and his son to live in. One day, David kept asking his dad if they could go get ice cream, and Edwin had to say no because he was so behind on his work. He realized he needed someone or something to watch over his son and keep him entertained so he could devote more time to his work. He then
this can't
built
go wrong.
The Mimic.
Wait, so is this not the plot of that movie Megan?
The endoskeleton was programmed to mimic anything it saw. David loved the endoskeleton, and Edwin was finally able to get a ton of work done. The Mimic even eventually had its own makeshift tiger plushie that it carried around, just like David's. Everything was great until one day when Edwin was busy working, David chased after his red ball that was rolling into the street and got hit by a car, killing him. Edwin, so overwhelmed with sadness and rage, was only left with the Mimic, who was still mimicking his deceased son.
Ooh, that would
In a
be
fit
tough.
of rage, Edwin destroyed the endoskeleton, hitting it over and over again with a metal rod. The story then skips ahead in time to a few months later. Edwin is missing, and a group of Fazbear employees were sent to the abandoned factory where Edwin and his son lived for unknown reasons. The entrance to the building had double doors that locked behind you once you were inside. Now locked inside, the Fazbear employees were left to deal with the Mimic, who started
This seems like a very bad design choice.
The Mimic loved dressing up in disguises, using old costumes left behind by Edwin. The Mimic first used a jester costume, then switched its costume to other characters, eventually killing off every employee by ripping off their limbs. The Mimic was taught to mimic whatever it saw, so after that day where Edwin took all of his anger out on it, it now was going to do the same to anyone it came in contact with. So let me know if you've heard this before. So we've got a dad who built a robot for his kid. The kid dies with his death involving a car. Now the robot was then literally a robotic version of his kid. The dad then, after the death of his kid, pours his agony into the robot, beats it up, and now the robot is an evil version of his now deceased kid. This story is quite literally mimicking Henry's story. Edwin was revealed to be the creator of the main four animatronics, something Henry also reveals to be the case.
Small souls trapped in prisons of my making.
We literally see Edwin's robotic vacuum in Henry's pizzeria in FNAF 6. Henry rebuilt his daughter Charlie after her murder, which also involved a car. In the books, Henry pours his agony into the adult Charlie bot, who Afton then steals and turns into Baby/Elizabeth. Baby lured kids in with ice cream, which was David's favorite snack. So if Baby really is the in-game version of the Mimic, is there in-game evidence to back this up?
Okay. I see the parallels. Not sure that I see it all the way to Elizabeth being the Mimic. Because in the games, Henry didn't create Circus Baby. That's where it differs from the books. So I don't really see that, but I'm curious to hear the evidence he presents.
The first game Baby was introduced in, FNAF World. JC Jack on Twitter pointed out that the Mendo character from FNAF World could easily be a mix of the words Mimic and Endo. A character named Mimic was already established in the game, so that's not too hard to believe.
But I don't think that the Mimic was already established in FNAF World. I do think FNAF World is more important than a lot of the community likes to believe, but I highly doubt they had the Mimic in mind back then. And I mean, Mimic for an attack, like, it mimics, like that. Mimic is a common term. So it's hard for me to know for sure that that would be a parallel to the Mimic that we're seeing now.
Also share one very distinct feature, the antenna on top of both of their heads. This antenna can also be found on another character in this franchise, Baby. But not just Baby. The antenna also shows up on every animatronic we know that Henry created. As we know, the whole idea of Afton stealing the Trouble Dot and turning it into Baby was in the Silver Eyes trilogy, which began releasing a whole 6 months before Baby was introduced in FNAF World Up.
But we have no evidence in the games that Henry created Circus Baby. It really doesn't fit with everything we understand about the current continuity of the games. Is there a way... Now I'm like, okay, is there a way that Henry could have made Circus Baby? And I don't see it. I would have to look more closely at it, and I feel like it makes things way more complicated than it needs to be. But, you know, what else is new?
It was also Update 2 that Scott said he wanted to pull elements from for FNAF Into Madness. If you keep up with the channel, you already know that I think FNAF Into Madness is the games we are currently playing. With the BB World game and Security Breach,
I see his arguments for this.
Scott Into Madness in the game files. The name Into Madness came from Foxy.exe, where Foxy says,
"Be sure your step through the heart of madness."
This was Scott introducing the idea of a character entering the real world by driving the player of a minigame into madness, which is what we see happen to Vanessa in FNAF VR, and now I believe happened to Gregory when he played the BB World game.
I have already watched John's theory on that, and it's really good. I would highly recommend it.
.exe in Update 2 is Nightmare Rion, the evil/dark version of Charlie, which is quite literally what Baby is in the books. Not to mention in Security Breach, there's a secret room in the Endo daycare that features an endoskeleton that only activates once you grab the Nightmare Rion plush sitting in front of it.
No, I'm sorry, it specifically says Nightmare plush. Like, I know it's Nightmare Rion, but aside from Nightmare Rion being modeled after the puppets, there's no correlation between Charlie and Nightmare Rion. Nightmare Rion is a counterpart of Nightmare, not a counterpart of the puppet. So I definitely disagree on that. And that's even further reinforced by the plush that we get in Security Breach being labeled Nightmare plush, not Nightmare Rion.
I believe Baby, aka the evil version of Charlie that Henry built and then Afton stole, is the big bad and will be revealed to be the big bad in the DLC. I know that sounds insane, but stay with me.
A little bit.
I know all of you hardcore Mimic enjoyers are pressing X to doubt everything I've said in this video so far because of one very important thing I left out, the epilogues. So let's talk about them. If you don't know, at the end of every Tales from the Pizzaplex book, there's an epilogue, and all of these epilogues from every book are one coherent story. The epilogues in the Tales books also feature the Mimic. The story begins with some workers who were hired to clean up the old pizzeria we see under the Pizzaplex. While they were cleaning though, they received a delivery of quote state-of-the-art animatronics that were for the Pizzaplex. These were presumably the Glamrock animatronics.
Right.
One of the workers quickly noticed that one of the animatronics was destroyed, saying quote, "Well, they're gonna need another guitarist," referring to what I think was Bonnie. The workers had a lot of work to do, but one of them had a plan. What if these new animatronics could do the work for us? So he plugged his laptop into Bonnie and ordered it to take off the arms and legs of all of the endoskeletons laying around and throw them into a pile. And surprisingly, Bonnie did what he was told. Once he was done with the endoskeletons though, he started ripping off the arms and legs of the workers, one by one tearing them apart. One of the workers escaped and told the guys to seal up the entrance with cement, locking Bonnie and all of the dead workers inside. Later on in the epilogues, a group of friends decide to go explore the same pizzeria the Bonnie animatronic was left in. Eventually, they get trapped in there with him, and he starts starts killing them off one by one. In the newest epilogue, we learned that the Bonnie Endo that was killing them was version 2 of the original Mimic endoskeleton, and that Fazbear Entertainment actually built a whole line of these Mimic endoskeletons. And that's basically all we know so far from the epilogue.
A whole line?
Obviously,
Why?
this Bonnie Mimic endoskeleton is a big metaphor for Burn Trap.
Yes, and with that, honestly, I was always under the impression that Burn Trap was just the corpse of Afton possessed by Glitch Trap. I never thought that Burn Trap was another iteration of revived Afton. Mostly because of the purple glow in the eyes and the fact that we see him directly infecting Freddy with the Glitch Trap virus. And if William Afton and the Glitch Trap virus were two separate things, I don't think that would be possible. So I always thought that Burn Trap was just a vessel for Glitch Trap. And so now this is just changing the name to Mimic instead of Glitch Trap. Like, it's just giving a new name for something I already thought was the case. So to me, it's not super groundbreaking, but again, I haven't actually delved into the stories myself.
Burn Trap isn't actually William Afton, but a Mimic endoskeleton that's trying to replicate William Afton. Now, do I believe that the Mimic we hear about in the epilogues is Burn Trap? Yes. But do I believe the story we hear in the epilogues is 100% how it happened? No. That wasn't the case for the epilogues in the Fazbear Frights books, and I don't think that's the case now.
So this is a hot topic of debate on Twitter right now. Whether the Tales of the Pizzaplex are canon to the same continuity as the games. Because Fazbear Frights, they specifically said this is a different continuity. But Tales of the Pizzaplex is kind of up in the air. At one point, there was something on the website saying set in the world of the games, but being set in the world of something doesn't necessarily mean the same continuity. So to me, that's not evidence that they're exactly the same, but the books themselves do seem to have way more ties to the games than Fazbear Frights did. So I think Tales of the Pizzaplex is probably closer to the games than Fazbear Frights was. But I also don't think it's necessarily exactly how things happen in the world of the games. They're just very similar and help us to fill in the gaps.
Here's what I think happened. So it seems that in order to cut corners on development, Fazbear Entertainment stole Edwin's Mimic program and used it for their VR game. But when they scanned Mimic 1 into the game, the program quite literally got the spark notes of Afton's greatest hits, because that game quite literally spells out the story of Afton through the minigames. The program
and that created Glitch Trap,
a new digital recreation of William Afton created by the Mimic 1 software. Glitch Trap was now willing to do anything to get out of the VR game and enter the real world. That's where Vanessa comes in. While playtesting the game, Vanessa fell under the control of Glitch Trap, now becoming his reluctant follower who he could control. After Vanessa gets infected, he orders her to make a bunny costume, just like him. She even starts mimicking his behavior, his wave, his shushing motion, his skipping. Glitch Trap then realizes he needs an endoskeleton of his own to occupy, so Vanessa gets to work on that. Vanessa then destroys Bonnie to use his endo for Glitch Trap. We see proof of this in-game. When we first meet Vanessa in the first aid area, she walks away into a gated-off room. This room is where you can find the duffel bag about Bonnie's last whereabouts and
I thought that was
Bonnie's
interesting.
leg. And if Vanessa is using parts of Bonnie's endoskeleton to help rebuild Afton, and one of Bonnie's legs is on this table, the other one is attached to Burn Trap.
Yeah, I mean, I always assumed that that was where Bonnie was, that he was part of Burn Trap because of that foot right there. That is clearly the same shape and design as Glamrock Bonnie's would have been. So I have always thought that. I thought that Bonnie was the first animatronic that Vanessa tested the Glitch Trap virus on and had him come down and then dismantled him and used his parts for Burn Trap. That is always what I thought. So far, honestly, this isn't contradicting anything I believed, aside from everything John's saying about Elizabeth, which I do not understand how it fits in.
And I think it's entirely possible that Vanessa used parts of Scraptrap's endoskeleton and some of the new and old endos that Fazbear Entertainment
Yeah, I
made,
think that's
which explains why
fair.
the other leg doesn't have the same amount of toes as the Bonnie leg.
Yes.
Why would Glitchtrap want Bonnie? Because Glitchtrap wants to mimic William Afton. No other animatronic would make sense. After decommissioning Bonnie, Vanessa then put the Glitchtrap virus into the Bonnie endo. We see this in the FNAF AR emails when Vanessa isolates the virus into one place, aka into the Bonnie endo. Now, all that Vanessa needs to do is get the Bonnie / Glitchtrap / Mimic endo to Afton's body. She does this by using Glamrock Freddy to clear the path down to where Afton's body lived. The Bonnie endo, now with Glitchtrap inside of it, then quite literally takes Afton's corpse and puts it on himself, which is why when we see Burntrap in-game, Afton's corpse is on a newer version of the Bonnie endoskeleton. We also learned that Bonnie had special pointy fingers so he could play the bass, which is what we see on Burntrap. So yes, Burntrap is not technically William Afton. He's the Mimic 1 software that turned into Glitchtrap that Vanessa then turned into a physical form.
That's what I always thought, it's just putting a different name to it.
Haven't noticed yet, I have quite literally contradicted myself. At the beginning of the video,
I
said that the Mimic was Baby, and now I'm saying it's Burntrap. But like I said earlier, we find out that Fazbear Entertainment built their own versions of the Mimic endoskeletons. This is what I believe Burntrap is made from. The OG Mimic in the story with Edwin and his son, I still believe is the Charlie Bot / Baby. The Mimic that Edwin built is never described to have bunny ears. And if you remember, David and the Mimic both had tiger plushies that they carried around with them. And as much as people like to say that it looks like Burntrap is holding a plushie in his arm, every other time we see Afton, his arms are at his side.
Okay, and with this, I have to go back to what John said just a few minutes earlier of the books are not necessarily one-to-one. So yes, the Mimic in the books carried a tiger everywhere, but that doesn't mean that the in-game counterparts would do the same.
In this part of the cutscene, I'm just not convinced that's what he's doing. And if Burntrap was
I definitely don't think he has
a tiger plush, that would imply the existence of Edwin, his son, and the tiger plushie in the game's timeline, which I don't see being the case since Edwin is very obviously a parallel to Henry. And in the epilogues where the Burntrap Mimic is featured, it's never described to be holding a plushie or even looking like it's holding a plushie. One thing I forgot to mention about the Mimic is that when it was playing with Edwin's son David, they used to draw on multicolored sheets of paper, which is exactly what we see in the sticky note room in Security Breach. But to get to the sticky note room, you have to go through the sewers until you reach this weird structure. It seems that the Pizzaplex was built on top of not just the old pizzeria, but some other structure. Judging by the parking spaces, it looks to be an abandoned parking structure, but I think this could easily be the in-game parallel of the abandoned factory Edwin and his son lived in. Need more proof? The Mimic and Edwin's son also used to draw on multicolored sheets of paper, like in the sticky note room that is connected right to the structure. And above the sticky note room, we have a workstation with endo blueprints on the table, which mimics Edwin's workstation where he built the Mimic. The Mimic is also known for tearing off the arms and legs of anything it sees. And what do we see as we enter the sticky note room? Staffbot torsos missing all of their arms and legs. This all seemed like
that
a
is
slam dunk,
interesting.
but even with all of that, I was still having doubts until I realized this. One of the biggest things we know about Edwin's warehouse is that when the Fazbear employees entered it, the double doors locked behind them, trapping them inside. This is exactly what happens when you enter the sticky note room. The big double doors lock behind you, trapping you inside. Also, like I said, I believe the original Mimic was Henry's rebuilt version of Charlie, and in the source code, the doors we use to enter the sticky note room are titled Charlie Door. There are just way too many connections here for this to be a coincidence. And all of this is to say that I think my original theory for who lived in the sticky note room might actually be correct. I definitely think it's possible that a robotic version of Charlie occupied that room. Just to clarify,
still not entirely convinced on that,
an actual
but
character in the game universe, and I don't think that's his actual warehouse. All I'm saying is that these connections are real.
It's
and
interesting.
I think we'll find out way more about what these connections mean.
The
in
parallels
DLC.
are
My guess
interesting.
right
I will
now
give him
is
that.
This connects to Henry and the Charlie bots. One thing I've been looking back at recently is the wall code code in the sister location room in Security Breach, and what it could possibly mean. If this is Michael's room, let's just assume that Michael wrote the code. And since this room is featured in sister location, there has to be some connection to that game. And I believe that connection is the one time we hear Michael speak in this entire franchise, during his speech to his father. In the speech, he says that he put her, aka Elizabeth, back together.
And I found her. I put her back together.
And in the code on the wall, it says, break and mend, I built the breath. They hunt now, drawn to life. But if Michael is only talking about Elizabeth, why would he be using they instead of she? That's because maybe there isn't just one
I don't necessarily think that's
what
he's
novel
talking
trilogy,
about there.
Henry created 4 versions of Charlie.
We don't even know for sure that Michael wrote that.
The final book literally being titled The Fourth Closet. Now let me point you towards the map we see in sister location during the Funtime Freddy section. On this map we see the Afton house, Fredbear's, the bedroom from FNAF 4, and the plush trap minigame, with each gray dot representing an animatronic. This is something that Rye Toast actually pointed out to me a while back. We see Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, the Nightmare animatronics, and 4 separate dots with one in each closet. The 4 Elizabeth bots, one for each stage of her life. It's actually heavily hinted at that the Mimic wrote the symbols of the wall code on one of the sheets of paper he was drawing with Edwin's son, solidifying the connection between the Charlie/Elizabeth bot and the wall code. What Scott was trying to do with sister location is something that we never saw pay off in this franchise until now. I believe that this little girl is one of those 4 Charlie/Elizabeth bots that Michael put back together and might have occupied the sticky note room. But like I said earlier, I still believe Baby is going to be revealed as the big bad in the DLC, or at least one of the 4 versions of her. Why do I think this? Well, last month in the 5th Tales from the Pizzaplex book, we were introduced to the Storyteller. Long story short, Fazbear Entertainment built a big tree in the middle of the atrium in the Pizzaplex called the Storyteller. Inside the tree was an AI that had fiber optic cables that were connected to every part of the Pizzaplex and basically controlled everything. The AI ended up being the reason all of the robots started acting more aggressive,
so it was the Mimic,
which is what we see in Security Breach. Edwin, who still worked for Fazbear, noticed that the Storyteller was making everything worse. Because of this, Edwin decided to sneak inside the tree to see what was behind all of this. And what he found was quite literally a giant white tiger head. The same white tiger that his son and the Mimic were known for carrying around with them. The white tiger was running the same program that he created 40 years ago, Mimic 1. Obviously, this giant white tiger head is a little goofy and out of place. And when I think of a giant animatronic head that's goofy and out of place, I think of the giant Freddy head next to the pizzeria under the Pizzaplex. The Storyteller tree also had a bunch of black fiber optic cables connecting to every part
which
of
is
the
very
Pizzaplex.
similar
And what do we find after we see the giant Freddy head? The blob, which looks awfully similar to a bunch of black fiber optic cables in a giant clump. So do I think the Storyteller tree was actually a real thing in the Pizzaplex? No. But do I think it's a giant metaphor for the giant Freddy head and the blob? Maybe. If Baby really is the in-game version of the Mimic that Edwin built for his son, and the Mimic is represented by the giant white tiger head, then to me that screams that Baby is going to be behind the blob. That may sound insane, but we've seen this happen before in the Fazbear Fright series. Eleanor ended up being the big bad in those stories. And in FNAF World Update 2, the final boss looks like it's going to be the giant purple geist, but really gets revealed to be Chica's magic rainbow.
No, I do think there is still some version of Baby out there that is going to be a big bad at some point, because that's what we see in Fazbear Frights. I do believe that. I don't know if I buy that she's the Mimic, though. I need to look back and do some of my own research. I don't like to immediately discount theories just because they contradict what I believe. I like to give them a chance. So right now, I just don't see it, but I will look into it, and I will see what I think. But there is some kind of circus baby out there that will come back to be a big bad. I do believe that.
Now there's one more major thing we need to talk about. I think we can prove in Security Breach that the endos we see in that game are the newer versions of Henry's Mimic endo. As we learned in the story The Mimic, Edwin, aka Henry, was forced to have Fazbear Entertainment buy out his robotics company. And in my last theory, I talked about how in the FNAF 2 phone calls it reveals that Henry was the previous owner and that he lost the company.
We're gonna try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
What this story reveals is that Henry might have signed away the company, but he was still making all of the robots, which would include the security puppet, which looks shockingly similar to the design of the Funtime animatronics, further backing up that the Funtime's designs were actually Henry's that Afton.
I I don't like Henry being the one who designed the fun times. They are not his style. Like, they are child catchers. And that's really what's holding me up with all of this. Is how... We even hear Elizabeth say, "Daddy, didn't you make her just for me?" Talking to William. He's the one who made Circus Baby. He made all the fun times.
If Henry really did build all of the animatronics we see in the games, that would include the toy animatronics. And one quirk of the toy animatronics is that they're sensitive to bright light.
Flash your light at him from time to time. Those older models would always get disoriented with bright light. It would cause a system restart or something. Come to think of it, you might want to try that on any room where something...
I don't think Henry's with the company anymore by the time the toys are made,
that
though.
might have carried over to the newer models, too.
And so are the Glamrock animatronics. And what do we see hidden behind the arcade machine in Glamrock Freddy's green room? His matching toy version in plushie form. I'm aware that this video was insane, but if any of this theory ends up being correct, I will poop myself.
I think I missed something how it was relevant that Freddy's plush form was in the green room.
And so are the Glamrock animatronics. And what do we see hidden behind the arcade machine in Glamrock Freddy's green room? His matching toy version in plushie form. I'm aware that this video was insane,
toy
but
version.
if any of this theory ends up being correct...
Okay. I can definitely see why it's controversial. Yeah, I just can't really get behind Henry being the one to make Circus Baby in the fun times. There are some interesting parallels there that I do want to look closer at, but I don't think I agree with that part of the theory. However, all the burn trap part of it and how the mimic got into him, that I do 100% agree with. But well done, John, for making this theory, and thank you for doing us the service of summing up the short story that some of us have not been able to read yet. Stay hyper and keep theorizing, friends.